Well, thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. As Leah said, we are excited to be here on this Wednesday afternoon. Look, we're past the hump of the halfway mark in the week, so we're doing great, and we get to talk about for the next 40-ish minutes one of my favorite things to talk about. And I know that sounds really weird to say my favorite thing to talk about is data, but it is. And the reason being it's because data drives so much of what we do. It's everywhere. And I look at things in a different light when I think about the way that the data drives my everyday and your everyday and our kids' everyday and everything that goes on. So to kick things off, I want to tell a little story. So last night I'm going into the grocery store, and there at the door sits my huge table of kryptonite as I'm going through trying to maintain my New Year's resolution of eating healthy and exercising, right? And so you probably know what I'm talking about. It is the Girl Scout cookie table, okay? And so I tried my best to control myself, but as you see, I have one of these absolutely delicious, heavenly, made from the hands of an angel cookie containers in my hand. But the reason that I wanted to bring it to light is because I found myself as I got this container, first asking myself, when did they get so small and the price get so big? But then second, I looked at the ingredients and I looked at the nutritional information because in my head, I'm sitting there thinking, if I eat only two of these, that's only 150 calories and I can go to the gym and I can work it off and I can do this and I can do that. And that goes right along with what we're saying. You know, it's that whole using data. While it's not a test, it's still data in the world around us. So when we as adults do things like this and our kids do things like this, it just reinforces the importance of how data plays such a part in our life. So I put myself out there with my cookie data from last night. I want to introduce, many of you know Leah Pinto already. She is going to be our chat chief for this call. And so if you could think about just even today or the last 24 hours of your life, what's a situation or an instance where you found yourself using data of some sort? And if you just want to enter it real quickly in the chat, and then Leah can share out a couple of those. Um, my cookies, though, drove the day for me last night anyway. So, Leah, let me know if any data examples pop into the chat.
I definitely will. And in the meantime, I'll start with mine because I wear a Whoop. I don't know if y'all know about those, but that is like minute data down to absolutely everything you do. And it's like, oh my gosh, I've learned so much wearing this Whoop. So yeah, oh, the benchmarking, we have lots of answers coming in. Science benchmarks, of course, we're in that season of data. Fifth grade, data driven all day long. Like every decision, absolutely. Miles to empty before we get gas. I know
Yes.
my car.
So there with you. I get into trouble. My husband reminds me all the time, you realize that you're going to get stuck on the side of the road because you're trusting a 25-cent little dial on your car. I'm like, well, I have to use the data. It hasn't steered me wrong yet. Yes. I see blood pressure, I
Absolutely.
see taxes.
Taxes, yes.
So all kinds of stuff. And so
All
you can
data.
wait, and it's going to cause you some pause, I think, if you really just as you're living your life thinking, gosh, that really does control my life, and how we look at things. So for today, I just wanted to get your wheels turning in the data realm before we get started, but just a couple objectives to clarify so you guys can keep me on track and make sure that I answer all of your questions. Before we get started, though, my name is Courtney Williams, and I see a lot of familiar faces on the screen. If I don't know you yet, it's a pleasure to have you join us this afternoon. I've been in science education for 30 years, started as a fifth grade teacher. So, those of you who are feeling the pressures of testing right now, I can fully relate and empathize with what you're going through. And it's such a calling to work with kids, especially now, post COVID kind of dealt us a whole new set of cards. So hats off to you. And you are so respected amongst your peers and everyone. So what we're going to look at today, number one, is deciding what and why data is so important. Why do we care?
Courtney, are you
Yes.
meaning to be sharing?
I'm not yet. No.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
No.
just making sure.
No, you're good. You're good. You're good. But what is it? What is the data that's so important to us? How do we use data to improve? Because that's a big situation that we are faced with. We have all kinds of data being given to us all the time. How are we going to use it to get better? What's our role as a teacher with data? And then what are the students' roles when it comes to data? So that's what we're going to look at today. And now, Leah, I will
Thank
hopefully
you.
switch to share screen there. Okay, so looking at this, I'm just going to ask, and we can put it in chat and Leah can share out some responses, or if you want to share yourself, that would be lovely as well. But why is data so important? Why do we even care? Why do I care about the calories in my cookies, or why do I care about what a student got on their report card, or, fill in the blank with any kind of data points? Why is it so important? What do you think?
To make informed decisions.
Beautiful. Love
Yep,
that.
that's a great one. Get information,
Perfect. Yes, we get lots of information from data.
deciding grouping,
Perfect. Perfect. And one more.
making plans. Yeah, again, decision making, planning ahead.
Absolutely. So all
Hmm.
those are spot on. It's absolutely spot on with what we're looking at. Edward Deming, I love this quote. Without data, all we have is an opinion. And when we think
Wait,
about it,
you're still not sharing. Yes, ma'am. Now we see
okay,
it.
so now my cartoon will make more sense to you. All right. So yes, all of the items that you noted about data are absolutely true. And I think this is kind of funny, but in the same sense, it is a little bit true. Sometimes we're curious about what people are going to do with our data. And especially now with AI and all the new technology that's coming around, this cartoon is a little more close to home probably than they meant it to be when they did it. Okay, so now let's take a look at my favorite quote from Edward Deming. Without data, all we have is an opinion. And I do think this is so true because everything that we do is driven by, or it should be driven by data of some point. And some decisions are more heavily weighted on data than others. Some, it's like it's okay to be spontaneous in some instances, but for the most part, this is very important. Um, I find myself thinking about when I'm explaining data, it's kind of like when you don't feel well and you go to the doctor and the doctor says, "What's wrong?" And you say, "Well, I just don't feel right. I'm kind of achy or I'm cold or I'm hot or whatever it might be." He could make a decision just based on what he is hearing from you, or he could do blood work, which is what he's probably going to do, and figure out based on the data exactly what's wrong with you so that he's able to treat it. And that's really what we're doing when we're teachers and directors and coordinators or whatever your role may be. We're doing that blood work, if you will, to figure out exactly how we can best help students. And that might be helping them understand a concept, helping them doing better on an exam, or just being a better overall student. So, step one, when we're thinking about data, we have to gather and we have to analyze. And this is what we as educators are really good at. I feel like when it comes to gathering data, we do probably a better job than we even should. We get more data than we know what to do with. So that takes us to this word analyze. And this is where it gets a little bit trickier. Okay. So if we're thinking about analyzing data, how do we know what data is valuable? So I want you to think about the data that you work with within your school or your district. And what are some things, what are some variables that sometimes perhaps get in the way of data being valuable? Think about that for a second. And if you have some thoughts to share out, you can come off mute and share out, or we can man it in the chat as well, whichever is easiest for you. What's gonna be something that perhaps gets in the way? It's a variable that's just kind of makes the value of the data maybe not quite as great as it should be.
Oh, students cheating or students copying could
Yeah,
skew results.
that's a biggie,
That's
right?
a
Like who
biggie.
actually did the homework? Was it Johnny or was it Johnny's parents or did Johnny look on somebody else's paper? I'm picking on Johnny today.
Hmm.
What else? What's
Letting students use notes, like one teacher doing something and another teacher not, so that in like unevenness necessarily. Pushing buttons, not doing the thinking, they're just getting it done.
Yes, all those are so, so, so true. And even just looking at data from year to year, you guys, you get the folders, or they're probably not folders anymore. They were folders when I started teaching, where you're looking at how students did in their past grade levels, report cards and things like that. Not really knowing the expectation of the teacher or the classroom, boy, those can be huge variables, right? Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to include right here, you're looking at one of the intervention reports that's in the EduSmart Sorority program. And I like this because it really siphons out a lot of the noise with data. You're looking at a pre-test, you're looking at a post-test, and then you're able to assess growth. Because as you know, sometimes even just discrepancies between questions are going to skew that data. How many times have we looked at released star questions or whatever the tests were in the past and said, well, the reason they got it wrong is because they didn't know what that word meant. It wasn't necessarily the content that they didn't know, it was that one word. Um, that's a huge problem. So just being able to weed through and figure out exactly what the data is telling us and is it pure or not. So I want to challenge you to think about data in two different buckets. Okay. And I refer to data as being either cold data or warm data. So let me explain to you what that means. So cold data is just the data that you're getting from an assessment. It's that stick to the facts, nothing but the facts, here's what they scored. So let's say that you give a benchmark. You get the list of the students' names and you get a grade next to their name, and that's what they scored on that assessment. That would be cold data. Okay, so any test, here's the grade, something like that would go in that category, and that could be formative or summative, anything like that. Warm data, on the other hand, that's gonna be the things that perhaps are going on with a student or going on with an adult that are gonna play into or cause perhaps the cold data to look a little different. Okay, so for instance, one of the schools that I worked in a lot, its population had a lot of students that maybe didn't get dinner at night. Okay, so if I gave a test the next day, I had to take into account whether or not these kids are taking the test hungry or if they were fed and they were ready to rock and roll. That would be warm data. That's considering what situation that the student is in that might have driven the cold data to be what it is. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to give you an example. For those of you who have been around for a while, this is a movie. This is a picture of a movie called Blue Chips. And this was from back in 1994. That tells you my taste in movies here. But it had Shaquille O'Neal in it. And the story was about a guy who came in and he was coaching a basketball club, a basketball team rather, at a university. And it was back in the day where boosters and stuff like that were trying to bribe their, potential players under the table. Now it doesn't matter anymore, right? It's very open that they pay players and things like that. But the character that Shaq played could not score above 500 on his SAT. And so he wasn't going to be able to get into college, even though he was an amazing basketball player and they wanted him. So the coach called upon his ex-wife, who happened to be a teacher, and basically told her, I need you to tutor this kid. He can't score above a 500. He's just failing, and he can't seem to get it together. So I'm going to play a little snippet, and then we're going to talk about it. So here we go.
Okay, Nina, tell me the country located immediately north of the United States.
Spain.
Tell me the country located immediately south of the United States.
Canada.
All right, I'll give you $50 if you will tell me the country located immediately south of the United States.
$50.
50.
Mexico, followed by Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Costa Rica. Where's my $50?
Oh, I was lying.
Crazy.
Yeah, I was married to Pete. What's your excuse?
You start off insulting me with these third grade geography questions. You think you're liberal, but you're not racist.
Why'd you score 520 on your SATs?
Because I wanted to.
That makes a lot of sense, Nina.
When I was young, my hood was so dangerous, I joined the army and we invaded the Persian Gulf before vacation. Make my own sense.
So why are we here?
We're here because maybe I want to go to college and maybe I don't. I won't know until I get in and find out how much.
Ooh, okay, so Caught that right in time before they were going to say a bad word. So let's talk about that for a minute. What would you say is the cold data that they were dealing with? You guys can put it in chat if you'd like to. What's the cold data that Neon was exhibiting? Okay, yes, I see Stacy answered his SAT score. He couldn't get a score higher
I
than
had that
500,
at
right?
500.
So five, that's perfect. So that's the cold data. That's what the coach was using to say, "Hey, we got a problem. We need some help here. He can't score above 500, and if he can't score above 500, he can't get into college." What is the warm data? And hopefully you were able to hear that okay. But what are some of the things? There were a lot of pieces of warm data that we were looking at.
What he was motivated by, whether he wanted to go to college or not, money.
Yeah, he knew all the answers, right? He just was like, "No, I don't want to do well." Why did you score a 500? Because I wanted to. How many of you have had students like
Attitude.
that? Yeah, I think all of us, let's react with oh, what do we want to use? Let's react with a thumbs up if you've had a student much like Neon that's smart but just either doesn't want to or is kind of checked out or just kind of like, "You know what? I just don't really feel like it today." So, by no stretch is Courtney and Leah and others from EduSmart telling you that you should pay your students $50 to do well. That's not what we're doing here. Um, Having that conversation, though, to uncover maybe what is some of the cold data that's causing, or I'm sorry, what is some of the warm data that could perhaps be causing their cold data to be what it was, makes a huge difference in the way that you choose to intervene or differentiate for kids. Huge difference because there's a vast strategy to be used far and wide from a child that really doesn't understand which country is above the United States or below the United States, and one that just simply is like, "I don't really feel like it. I don't know if I want to go to college or not. So I don't care if I make a 500 on the SAT or not." It's a very different strategy. So when you're going through and looking at data, I would challenge you to work with your teachers, work with your campuses to also consider some of that warm data as they're going through the cold data. Cold data is great, very helpful, but sometimes we want to uncover just one more layer to look at maybe why that cold data is what it is. There's oftentimes answers. I was working with one campus one time, and this teacher's like, "You know what? I have such a routine. I don't understand why my students do so poorly. I give quizzes every single Friday, and this group of boys always does poorly." Well, come to find out, the group of boys that always did poorly, they were the football players. So Thursday night, they played football. So they didn't study for their test on Thursday night. She made an adjustment and started giving her tests on Wednesdays instead of on Fridays. And guess what happened to the scores in her class? Miraculously, the football players started doing better. So there's certain things that we want to make sure that teachers are aware of before they kind of get into a panic or get hair on fire about what they're going to do with their data. Okay? All right, so let's go back and talk a little bit more about this cold data, warm data thing and what it looks like not only for students, but also perhaps for teachers. So, warm data often can include things like basic needs. If we're thinking about students that maybe they don't have something warm to wear that day, but it's cold outside, maybe they are needing some nutrition, all kinds of different things. Distractions. Who are they sitting by? Who are they running around with? Whose boyfriend and girlfriend is upset or fighting with each other, and things like that. Glasses, as simple as saying, did they wear their glasses that day? All that plays into warm data. And then the teacher, I also listed on here as warm data because I think that makes a huge difference too. Is it someone with high expectations, low expectations? Maybe the day that a concept was covered, they were out that day and it was a sub. And so certain classes didn't get what they needed. So all those are going to play into the way that you're going to look at doing different groupings and things like that. So once you have this in play and you've looked at the cold data and you've considered the warm data, we're going to now talk about differentiating, okay? And This is one of the things that I think EduSmart, if you have the program, does so well, especially with the Star Ready program, because it creates those groupings for you. It helps you to determine who's going to be in small group instruction situations, who needs individualized learning, what do I need to send home so that parents can be involved? Do I need a full group instruction if it's something that just a lot of kids are missing concepts or missing understanding on? So thinking about bucketing the different types of data and then making decisions about how am I going to reach this specific group of learners is going to be a huge second step. So first step, identify the data. Second step, identify what you're going to do with the data. That's going to be the first two things that people do when they're going through and analyzing the different data choices that they're going to want to make. And then, of course, you want to assign and you want to track that growth. Um, Everything becomes more valuable in terms of data when you keep track of it. My calories on my cookies, if I just sit down and say, okay, I know that two of them is 150 calories, unless I track how many groups of twos that I actually eat, that 150 is not going to make a big impact on my health. Okay, so I want to make sure that I'm tracking that. And one of the best ways to track growth is to think about pre-tests, think about post-test, and how the difference, how that's going to determine or how that's going to affect the level that students are growing as they're interacting with those two different types of assessment. This format, those of you who are familiar, you know that this is our Star Ready program. If you haven't had a chance to look at the Star Ready program yet, please have a conversation with us afterwards and we're going to be happy to show it to you. But these three different pathways, whether it be teacher-led, station-based, or individualized learning, are all choices already pre-built that are going to allow you to really track and focus on that data and that growth. Okay. So really in teaching, while we do so many things different and we have to, create all these different situations to keep kids engaged and keep kids entertained, for lack of a better word, make sure that they're making connections and doing all these skills that we're supposed to do to create these humans that are able to not only function, but function at a high level. It really boils down to a very rinse and repeat kind of cycle. We're going to give them an assessment, we're going to analyze it, and then we're going to do something. We're going to have some type of action that takes place. And then guess what? We do the assessment, we analyze it, we take action. So if we can kind of keep this in mind as we're looking at data, and always keep in the back of your head, data drives the decisions that you make. Like you want to really focus on that in order to adjust your instruction anytime that's something that you need to do. Effective instructional leaders track data, they preach data, and they live data. This is from Michael Moody, an awesome book that he wrote around being leaders in education. And I love this because it's one of those things that it really makes everything you do intentional. And that's how you're going to get buy-in from the teachers that you work with parents, and with kids. Because at the end of the day, while you're being data driven, you're also encouraging kids to be data driven too. And they're data driven in a little bit different way, but it still is something that's going to benefit them in life. So think about your situations. We talked about taxes and we talked about cookies and we talked about all kinds of data that you interact with at the beginning. Kids also interact with data every day, all the way down to them being toddlers. And as parents, we would give them kind of like if then type deals, right? Like if you behave in the grocery store, I'll give you two gummy bears. Or that's how we did it in my house anyway. I'm ashamed to say we did a lot of bribing with gummy bears in my house at an early age. But we're constantly giving kids opportunities to interact with data. And how cool is it for kids, young kids, to be able to understand how setting goals can be driven by the data. I just think it's so interesting and so fascinating. A couple campuses that I worked with up here in Dallas Fort Worth, they would do all these elaborate boot camps to get ready for STAR. And one of the big things that they did, and they attribute a lot of success to, was, hey, we have our kids set goals every single day, every single benchmark. We'll do some type of learning and then we'll tell them, okay, there's 20 questions on this assessment. What's your goal? Because in order to pass, you have to get at least, whatever the number might be. I think they set theirs at 75 to make sure that everybody did it. So 20 question test, you have to get at least 15 right just to pass. So what's your goal? And kids would sit down and figure it out. And then they would even go as far as to when they were taking that 20 question test, if they knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that they got it right, they would put a star next to it. If they weren't totally sure, they would leave it blank. And then when they finished, they would count up their stars. And if they didn't have 15 stars yet, or 16, or whatever their goal was, they better go back and do some serious work on those questions that they don't have stars next to yet. And it was astounding how their scores grew. I think the last year that they did at their campus ended up fifth grade like 98%. And really high performing.
Whoa.
This was a campus that wasn't typically high performing. So just giving kids the opportunity to set goals and figure out it's not just a goal, but how are you going to get to that goal? And how they're going to get to that goal has to do with data. So using things even like, and this was one of our famous Leah's creations here, but giving them those checks to encourage that ownership of their data. Hey, how do you feel about how you did on this? Did you do great? Did you not maybe do so great? And if you didn't, what are some things that you could have done that will help you to improve next time? So it's really just taking ownership, setting goals, figuring out what the plan is based on data. It's very, very interesting and awesome to hear how kids talk about data. And even if you just ask them, like, hey, what do you think about setting a goal for the STAR test? Or what do you think about setting a goal for your grades on this upcoming report card? They're going to be really quick to tell you, I want to make straight A's. But then that follow-up question of, okay, how are we going to do that? What's the data that you're going to need to earn in order for that to happen? And boy, that's where their wheels really get to turning. And that's the kind of adults that I would love to take care of me someday as I'm old and decrepit, is ones that are able to think about data and think about goals and be able to reach those goals based on the knowledge that they have. So this is data to me, okay? This is, if you've ever seen this, there's actually like sports that these women are competing against each other. And I think even like lumberjacks and whatnot have different contests, but they get up on a log and they're facing different directions and they have to try to knock each other off the log. But data is that constant back and forth, that constant, I need to make changes, I need to adjust. If this happens, then I'm going to have to move this way. And just making that constant back and forth motion, if you will, to get that point across in terms of this is my data, this is where I want to go, what steps need to happen in the middle in order for that to be true. Okay, before we go any further, I want to share one more little clip with you. And this was actually from a journal, but I think that the conversations amongst the kiddos it's pretty cool. So I'll just let you take a
I
listen.
think everybody has a goal, even something that's small, like, hey, I want a candy bar. That's my goal for the day.
I would say my biggest dream is to become a lawyer. I have to work hard and try my best at everything I do.
I hope I one day go to college. Hopefully one day get a car.
When I look back on my life, I just want to be satisfied and proud of whatever path I did decide to go down. When I do set a goal and when I do tell myself I'm going to do something, I do everything I can to get that thing done. I don't give up easily.
I had to go to tutoring to help me get that goal of getting my math up. And I was worried that, oh no, they're gonna think I'm dumb or whatever. But like then when I started to get stuff, I was like, this is really starting to help me. You gotta fail once to keep going. The best are the best because they have failed. As simple as that.
There's so many things that you could do as a lawyer. You could be, a lawyer for a family, a lawyer for adoption, and stuff like that. And I think it'd be actually really fun. A specific goal that I'm working to achieve is to keep all A's until I graduate.
Last summer I started a mowing business. So far, I think I've earned $3,000. I'm specifically raising money for college one day to maybe one day be a culinary chef.
Like that. I wish you get like to wish it on a star, but a goal is you try to do it.
I love that. So it's like wishing on a star, but a goal is that you actually do it. So that's what we want kids to do. So before we finish and open it up to questions, I want to leave you with these 5 steps for effective data-driven instruction because that's really what we're going for. Okay, so remember back at the beginning, we talked about establishing those clear goals. So we're looking at what data are we going to use? We're going to look at the cold data first, then we're going to look at the warm data and see how that affected the cold data. We're going to figure out what those goals are. And these can be set by teachers, they can be set by students, they really should be set by both. Okay. Number 2, host those collaborative data meetings. So even amongst your peers, maybe your grade level or your campus, have those data meetings. They're just so important, even to talk to teachers from grade levels, past grade levels to say, hey, tell me about Susie, what's going on? She scored this on her test. Is this normal? Is there anything that I need to consider? Does she usually wear glasses? What's going on? So looking at the data and figuring out how we can make meaning of it. And then modeling and supporting. If we want students to look at their data and we want students to set goals, then we as educators should be doing that as well. We should also be setting goals and looking at what's going on in our own worlds and figuring out how that data is playing into the decisions that we make. And then number 4 is super important. So you got to monitor and you have to adjust. And this goes back to our little log rollers. When things happen, which they will, certain concepts are going to be harder than others for kids to understand. Certain things are going to pop up that you're going to have to make adjustments on. And that's so important that you don't just abandon ship or throw the baby out with the bathwater when you're looking at making those adjustments. And then 5, make it actionable. Don't just talk about the data, but what are you going to actually do? How is it going to change the way that you are able to instruct students and behaviors that are going to cause them to also make actionable data goals that are going to increase their understanding or their learning of a concept? So that was a very lot in a very short amount of time. So I did want to leave the last 5-ish minutes here and open it up for any questions, comments, concerns. Here's my email address. It's just Courtney@edgesmart.com. If you have any questions or want to know more about some ways that I've seen data being used really effectively and efficiently, I would love to talk to you about that or even dive into your own data and figure out how we can help you make a plan and make it actionable and make it meaningful for you and your students. So I'm going to stop my share here and answer any questions that may come up. And y'all feel free to put it in chat or just unmute and say it out loud if you have something that you want to share. We would love to hear from you.
Wow, Courtney, you just nailed it. We have no questions. You got us exactly where we need to be.
That's good. That's good. Well, it's definitely something to think about. And like I said, when you really just pause and think about all the places you use data in life and where it has served you well, I would bet that 100% of the time it's instances where you've taken the time to really think through it and goal set or figure out, how is it going to affect you? Is it going to be positive or negative? And then go from there.
And I love one of the things that stood out most to me is just hearing mom showing the kids how I use data all the time, like real life, in real life, and
Yes.
just showing them it's not just this abstract concept you only use in science class or math class. It's just part of everything. We have a question in the chat that says Bonnie has trouble turning data around quickly. What suggestions do you have for that speed issue?
That's a beautiful question, Bonnie. And I think that's one that a lot of people have. And I think the trick is narrow down the amount of data that you're actually looking at. Focus on what do you really want to glean from the data? Is it is it growth? Is it pre-test to post-test kind of situation? Is it looking for, I want to figure out if 70 is kind of my benchmark. Am I looking for students that performed lower than 70 and then make a decision after that? Most of the time, I think whenever we're looking at data, we get in data overload and we're trying to figure out or do too much with it at one time. So I would recommend, if I were you, figuring out what is that one thing you really want to get from the data and then focus on that. But I would certainly absolutely love to have a conversation with you later and maybe we can look at some of your data and I can help you a little more specifically there. But thank you for asking the question. Appreciate it.
Well, and really, we have science interns coming up, and I'm already in STAR review,
Mm-hmm.
but I want to use the science intern data. But that's a lot of data to turn around and revamp because I have to turn in lesson plans. I have to plan all that ahead of time.
Yes.
So that's what I'm having a hard time with is how am I going to use that data wisely?
How is the data given to you? How is it broken out? Is it by reporting category or standard or?
Honestly, I'm not 100% sure exactly how we're going to get it yet, but I think it's by category, but I'm not positive.
Okay. I would love for you to email me when you get that data and I will
Okay.
completely help you go through it. Because
Okay.
I've been there. I know what you're talking about. It's like,
Yes.
they give
Yes.
you all this helpful data that's
Right.
like,
Right.
what do I do with all this help? This is more help than I wanted, kind of a thing. Yes.
Right. Well, and with this eighth grade test, we really have no clue what's coming. And that's what's got me the most nervous is
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
am I going to do to make sure they're prepped?
absolutely. Reach out to me, honestly.
Thank you. Will do.
Well, we will stay on for about 5 more minutes if anybody else has any questions. If not, thank you so much. We want to be respectful of your Wednesday afternoon. So again, reach out if we can help you with anything even later. You're welcome to email us or call us or however you want to get to us, and we'll make sure that we provide you with any and all assistance that we can. So thank you all for coming.
Yes. Thanks, everybody. Dahlia, thank you for coming. And Bonnie, it's great to see you from Port Arthur, everybody. And Benita, thank you. I think I've seen you at another one too. And I really appreciate you all coming as well. And if you're implementing Star Ready already, please reach out if you need some assistance with that, of course.